Donald Trump is at war again, not with Democrats, not with the media, not with foreign leaders. This time, he's at war with his own vice president, and that should tell you everything you need to know about how unstable, chaotic, and fractured the Republican Party has become under Trump's leadership. Because what we are watching right now is not just a policy disagreement, it's not just an internal debate, it's not even a normal White House rift. This is a slow-motion political divorce. Donald Trump appears to be abandoning JD Vance publicly, privately, and strategically as tensions explode inside the Republican Party over war, foreign policy, and Trump's increasingly erratic decision-making. And the reason this matters is simple. JD Vance was supposed to be the future. Trump is acting like he's disposable. Right now, Trump seems determined to fight everyone in his orbit. He's yelling at Congress. He's attacking members of his own cabinet. He's pressuring the Federal Reserve. He's threatening institutions that are supposed to be independent. And now, he's openly clashing with the one person who should, in theory, be untouchable inside his administration, his vice president. And the trigger for this conflict? War. Specifically, Trump's reckless, contradictory, and increasingly aggressive posture toward Iran, a posture that JD Vance knows could destroy his political future. Let's start with the moment this all went sideways. Donald Trump stood in front of cameras and casually announced that Iran had called him to negotiate. He said it confidently, he said it vaguely, he said it like someone improvising policy on the spot. Iran called, they want to negotiate. A meeting is being set up, but we may have to act before the meeting. That wasn't strategy, that wasn't diplomacy, that was confusion masquerading as authority. And everyone inside the White House knew it, because you can't threaten military action while claiming diplomatic talks are underway without creating panic, not just internationally, but inside your own administration. Trump didn't explain what act meant. He didn't explain who called whom. He didn't explain what the goal was. And more importantly, he didn't explain why this sounded completely different from how he talks about Vladimir Putin. Trump has never spoken this way about Putin, never threatened him publicly, never warned him to be careful, never claimed leverage. But Iran? Tariffs, threats, strikes on the table. And that contradiction matters because it exposes what this really is. This isn't foreign policy, it's impulse control. Trump talks tough when he thinks it plays well politically. He goes vague when he doesn't understand the consequences, and he contradicts himself when he doesn't care who has to clean it up afterward. And JD Vance knows exactly what this leads to, because JD Vance ran and rebranded himself on one central promise: no new wars. That was the entire pitch, not just to voters, but to the Republican base that is exhausted by endless foreign entanglements. Vance sold himself as the anti-interventionist, the America-first skeptic of military adventures, the guy who would push back against the old neocon playbook. That image is now on life support because Trump is drifting toward war again, and he doesn't care who it burns politically. Inside the White House, this created immediate tension, not because JD Vance suddenly grew a conscience, but because he understands math. A war with Iran would explode the economy. It would spike oil prices. It would destabilize global markets. It would destroy any remaining claim that this administration represents restraint. And most importantly for Vance, it would destroy his 2028 ambitions before they even begin. That's why leaks started appearing. Suddenly, anonymous officials were talking to the press. Suddenly, stories emerged describing Vance as the voice urging diplomacy. Suddenly, reports framed Trump as leaning toward military strikes, while Vance pushed to give talks a chance. That doesn't happen by accident. That's a signal. JD Vance is trying to create daylight between himself and Trump. Quietly, carefully, but deliberately, because he knows what comes next. Trump doesn't back down. Trump doesn't pivot gracefully. Trump escalates, and anyone standing near him when things blow up gets blamed. We've seen this movie over and over again.
Cabinet secretaries, advisors, attorneys, general, defense officials, they all think they can survive Trump by staying close. They can't. JD Vance is learning that lesson in real time, and Trump is already treating him like a problem instead of a partner. Behind the scenes, Trump's allies are furious. They see Vance's push for diplomacy not as caution, but as disloyalty. They see his leaks not as concern, but as positioning. And Trump hates positioning. Trump wants obedience. And that's why this conflict matters far beyond Iran, because it reveals something fundamental. Trump does not see JD Vance as a successor. He sees him as a subordinate who's forgetting his place. And when Trump feels challenged, especially on something performative as war, he lashes out. This is the same Trump who listens to the loudest voices in the room, the Lindsey Grahams, the permanent war crowd, the people who believe American power must always be displayed through force. Those are the voices Trump still trusts, not Vance, not restraint, not caution. That's why JD Vance is leaking. He's trying to protect his brand. He's trying to preserve his anti-war credibility. He's trying to make sure that when things go wrong, he can say, "I warned him." But here's the problem. Trump doesn't tolerate dissent, and he never forgets. The moment Trump believes Vance is undermining him, even quietly, the relationship is effectively over. And that's where we are now. Trump appears ready to abandon JD Vance politically, to sideline him, ignore him, and eventually blame him if things collapse. This isn't partnership, it's containment, and it's happening at the worst possible time for Republicans because the party is already tearing itself apart. The House majority is shrinking, the Senate is unstable.
Midterms are approaching. Donors are nervous. Markets are volatile. And instead of unifying the party, Trump is picking fights with everyone who isn't 100% submissive, including his own vice president. This is not strength. This is fragmentation. What makes this fight between Donald Trump and JD Vance so dangerous isn't just the disagreement itself. It's the timing, the method, and what it reveals about the Republican Party's internal decay. Because JD Vance is not rebelling loudly, he's not giving speeches, he's not contradicting Trump on television. He's doing something far more threatening in Trump's world. He's leaking. And leaks are how power shifts quietly in Washington. JD Vance understands something that many Republicans learned too late. You don't beat Trump head-on. You survive him by shaping the narrative around him, especially when he's self-destructing. That's exactly what's happening here. The Wall Street Journal story didn't appear by accident. It wasn't sloppy reporting. It wasn't speculation. It was placement. Trump leaning toward striking Iran as Vance urges diplomacy. That framing does three things at once. First, it presents Trump as reckless. Second, it presents Vance as responsible. Third, it creates a paper trail. When future voters, donors, or primary opponents ask what JD Vance did while Trump was pushing the country toward another war, Vance can point to this moment and say, "I tried to stop it." This is not courage. This is insulation. And Trump knows it. That's why this rift is growing so fast. Trump does not tolerate anyone preparing an exit strategy while standing next to him. In his mind, loyalty means you go down with the ship, smiling. JD Vance is not doing that. He's already looking ahead to 2028, and Trump can feel it. That's why this feels like abandonment, because it is, not in words, but in intent. JD Vance is no longer operating as Trump's vice president. He's operating as a future presidential candidate who happens to be trapped in Trump's administration. And that creates an unavoidable collision, because Trump's instincts are about dominance in the moment. Vance's instincts are about survival in the long run. Those two things cannot coexist. Trump doesn't care what this looks like in 3 years. He cares about looking strong today. He cares about posturing. He cares about appearing decisive, even if he doesn't understand the consequences.
Vance, on the other hand, cares deeply about how this looks to a Republican base that was promised no new wars and America first restraint. And that promise is collapsing in real time. Let's be clear about what's actually happening here. Trump is not an anti-war president. He never was. He bombed more countries in his first year than any modern president. He expanded drone strikes. He tore up diplomatic agreements without replacements. He escalated conflicts while pretending they didn't count as wars. No new wars was branding, not policy. JD Vance tried to build his entire identity around that branding, and now Trump is exposing it as hollow. This is why Vance is panicking quietly, because if Trump strikes Iran, even partially, the entire Vance pitch dies instantly. You cannot run in 2028 as the anti-intervention Republican while serving as vice president during a major military escalation. That contradiction would haunt him forever. So Vance is doing the only thing he can do without openly defying Trump. He's creating distance. He's letting reporters know he pushed diplomacy.
He's letting allies whisper that he urged restraint. He's positioning himself as the adult in the room. And Trump sees this as betrayal, which is why Trump's behavior toward Vance has subtly shifted. Notice what's missing lately. No praise, no public reinforcement, no JD agrees with me moments. Instead, silence. And in Trump world, silence is a warning. Trump's pattern is always the same. First, he ignores you, then he undermines you, then he blames you. JD Vance is somewhere between step 1 and step 2. And Republicans are watching this unfold with growing anxiety because this isn't just about Vance. This is about what happens when Trump's inner circle starts preparing for life after him while he's still in power. That's when chaos accelerates. We've already seen this with the Federal Reserve fight. Scott Bessent reportedly called Trump privately to warn him that attacking Jerome Powell would cause panic and further damage an already fragile economy. Trump ignored him. Now the same thing is happening with foreign policy. Senior officials are warning Trump that escalation with Iran would be catastrophic, economically, diplomatically, politically. Trump is ignoring them too. And that's why Republicans are fracturing. Because when Trump stops listening to the people tasked with managing reality, the party starts bleeding credibility. The markets notice, allies notice, voters notice, and more importantly, donors notice. This is where the Republican Party's internal math turns brutal. If Trump pushes the country toward war and the economy stumbles, Republicans lose the midterms. If Republicans lose the midterms, Trump becomes a true lame duck. And if Trump becomes a lame duck, his grip on the party evaporates fast. That's why figures like JD Vance are hedging now. They don't want to be trapped defending decisions they didn't control. And Trump hates that more than anything. Because Trump doesn't believe in shared responsibility, he believes in dominance. That's why he surrounds himself with people who flatter him, not people who challenge him. Which brings us to the other side of this equation, the people Trump is still listening to. Lindsey Graham, the interventionists, the permanent war advocates. These are the loudest voices in the room, and Trump responds to volume, not wisdom. So when Graham goes on television calling for aggressive action, Trump hears validation. When hawks frame war as strength, Trump hears applause. JD Vance's quiet caution doesn't stand a chance against that, and Trump's ego will always choose praise over prudence. That's why this fight is not going away. It's escalating. Because the more Vance tries to distance himself, the more Trump feels undermined. And the more Trump feels undermined, the more aggressively he asserts dominance, which leads to public humiliation, marginalization, scapegoating. That's the endgame, and Republicans know it. That's why this turmoil feels different than past Trump drama. It's not just dysfunction, it's fragmentation. The party is no longer unified around Trump's instincts. It's splintering between those who want to survive him and those who want to ride him into oblivion. JD Vance is firmly in the first camp, and Trump is starting to treat him accordingly.
What happens next is where this story stops being about personalities and starts being about collapse. Because once a party's leaders begin acting primarily to protect themselves from their own president, governance becomes impossible. That is exactly where Republicans are right now. JD Vance's quiet break from Donald Trump is not an isolated incident. It's a signal, a warning flare, and others inside the party are already taking notes. They see the same thing Vance sees. Trump is no longer managing power, he's burning it. Every new fight is unnecessary. Every new threat is impulsive. Every new escalation creates more enemies than allies. And the closer we get to the midterms, the more dangerous that becomes for Republicans who still want to hold office after Trump. This is why you're seeing a subtle but undeniable shift. Republicans are no longer asking, how do we help Trump win? They're asking, how do we survive Trump losing? That is a massive change. For years, Trump's dominance was built on fear and inevitability. Lawmakers believed opposing him meant political death. They believed the base would never turn. They believed Trump's grip was permanent. But that belief is eroding, not because Trump suddenly became weaker, but because his behavior has become more costly. Let's be very clear about the stakes. If Trump escalates toward war with Iran, the consequences will be immediate. Oil prices spike, markets drop, global uncertainty explodes. American voters feel it instantly. There's no spin that fixes that. No amount of rhetoric about strength or America first can hide higher gas prices, market volatility, and the fear of another endless conflict. Republicans know this. That's why JD Vance is scrambling to keep his fingerprints off the decision.
That's why others are quietly doing the same, because once the consequences land, Trump will look for someone to blame. He always does, and vice presidents make excellent scapegoats. Trump doesn't abandon people loudly at first. He isolates them. He lets them twist in the wind. Then he turns on them when it's useful. JD Vance understands this pattern. He watched it happen to Mike Pence. He watched it happen to cabinet secretaries. He watched it happen to advisors who thought they were untouchable. So now he's trying to get ahead of it. But here's the problem. Trump doesn't need Vance anymore. That's the unspoken truth driving all of this. Trump already has the base. He already has the spotlight. He already has the loudest voices amplifying him. JD Vance was supposed to be the bridge to the future, the next generation, the intellectual justification, the rebranding. But Trump isn't interested in the future. He's interested in control. And anyone who starts acting like an independent political actor becomes a threat. That's why Trump appears to be abandoning Vance, not formally, not yet, but strategically, ignoring his counsel, sidelining his influence, letting leaks frame Vance as the other side of the debate. That creates distance, and distance becomes disloyalty in Trump's mind. The broader Republican Party is watching this with a mix of fear and calculation, because if Trump is willing to discard his own vice president for pushing diplomacy, what does that say about everyone else? It says loyalty is temporary. It says restraint is punishable. It says survival requires separation. That's why more Republicans are quietly preparing for a post-Trump world, even while pretending they're still loyal. They won't say it publicly yet. They won't challenge him directly, but they're laying groundwork. Leaks, statements, votes, procedural resistance. It's already happening, and once it starts, it accelerates. This is how internal wars begin in political parties, not with a single rebellion, but with dozens of small acts of self-preservation that eventually add up to defiance. JD Vance is just one of the first visible cracks. And the irony is that Trump created this environment himself by attacking institutions, by threatening allies, by escalating every conflict, by refusing to listen. Trump forced everyone around him to start thinking about exits. And now, instead of commanding loyalty, he's provoking fear. That fear doesn't produce obedience forever. It produces plotting. And that's what makes this moment so dangerous for Trump,
because once people stop believing you're good for their future, they stop protecting you. They let you make mistakes. They let you overreach. They let you fail. JD Vance is not trying to save Trump from himself. He's trying to save himself from Trump. And that distinction matters because it tells us exactly where this is headed. Trump may still hold rallies, he may still dominate headlines, he may still command a loud base, but inside the machinery of power, Congress, the cabinet, the donor class, the party infrastructure, something has shifted. Trump is no longer seen as inevitable, he's seen as volatile. And volatility is something politicians hedge against, not commit to. This is why the turmoil keeps growing. It's why Republicans are fighting among themselves. It's why messaging is collapsing. It's why leaks are increasing. It's why unity is gone. Trump's instinct is to double down, to lash out, to threaten, to dominate. But that instinct is now accelerating his isolation. JD Vance's break, however subtle, is proof of that, and it won't be the last. As midterms approach and pressure mounts, more Republicans will quietly follow the same path, publicly loyal, privately distancing, because they know what's coming. They know that when the consequences of Trump's decisions land, whether it's economic pain, foreign escalation, or electoral disaster, he will not protect them. He will blame them, and no one wants to be standing next to him when that happens. This is not the end of Trump's influence, but it may be the beginning of his control. And that distinction matters because influence can be loud and chaotic. Control requires trust. Trump is losing that trust even from the people closest to him, including his own vice president. And once that reality sinks in across the party, the internal war you're seeing now won't calm down. It will intensify. Not because Republicans suddenly grew principles, but because they finally grew fear. And fear, when it turns inward, destroys parties faster than any opposition ever did.